you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hey folks, it's Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, there are latest things that makes it official. Welcome to the big show. We certainly appreciate you guys being here. As always, refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTokity, and Chris Voss Facebook.com for all the groups and stuff we have for the show on Facebook. Today we had an amazing young man joining us on the show today. We're going to be talking about his book, his insights, some of the works he's done, and how, maybe he might have some advice to make your life better, improve the quality of your life, and get more done with it. Or not. Maybe he'll just teach you, how to chase hookers and blow. I don't know. We'll find out here in a second. He's the author of the newest book that just came out May 13th, 2024, and is being revised with a major publisher on the 15th of this month. Operating Manual for Enlightenment, Recreating Your Mind with Lincoln Stoller. Lincoln, welcome to the show. How are you?
Pretty good today. Pretty good, thanks.
Pretty good? Should we check back tomorrow? No, I'm just teasing.
It changes day by day. It does.
Doesn't it, though? Mm-hmm. So give us the .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
My website is mindstrengthbalance.com. And that's really the center of, my friends complain that the page is too big, but that's where it's sort of all located. And there's links to books and what I do.
So check that out, people.
Describe.
So give us a 30,000 overview of what's in the new revised edition of your book that you're doing.
The publisher wanted to make it smaller because they said books on enlightenment sell to women between 30 and 45 and must be below 300 pages. And mine was 340. So I cut out the last chapter on healing. So I like the original one.
Who needs that chapter?
Whatever,
You can put the healing part, I think, would be the most important part, wouldn't it? I don't know.
But, people don't heal until they're ready to. So really it's about getting ready to. So whatever.
Heal, people. Damn it. We're tired of you all running around being unhealed.
Oh, let's get to it, really.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. I didn't have a biography for you. Tell us about your upbringing, kind of what influenced you, how you eventually got into writing. You've written several books, too. We should plug them as well.
The books are a diversion. They're just big calling cards with lots of pages in them. And people think you're smart if you write a book. But I guess it's harder than a calling card.
Yeah.
But, the point is, if you have something to say, it's not that hard to write a book.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I don't really know why I am what I am. But I look at my family history and so forth. And my parents were involved with arts and engineering and the great artists of the, last century. So Bucky Fuller and Sandy Calder and a bunch of architects. My father was an architectural photographer. Oh, wow. So he knew all these guys, Frank Lloyd Wright and those folks. And the Eameses. I like the Eames. They're great. Oh. If you remember their movie called, what was that movie called? I forgot. I'm forgetting a lot of things these days. Anyway.
Because of the age, man. I'm feeling you.
I'm afraid it's possible.
I had COVID 2 weeks ago.
No, I was in the hospital with that.
Still. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't quite make it there, but it was not a fun. It was not a fun experience. I'm still
but educational. Oh, in a bad way,
I like your spin on things. I like the way you spin on it. Okay, well that was educational.
But look, get back to the point here. Was that when you hang around as a kid with people who are unusual, you kind of develop your own unusual tendencies, not putting up with nonsense and wondering why the world is crazy. So this started early, and first I was a criminal, but they didn't catch me, so maybe I guess criminal is when you're caught. But, a vandal at age 8 it can be pretty destructive. And I blame my parents. Why not?
Yeah, it's always good to blame
That's what they're there for.
That's what they're there for.
And, I've spent the rest of my life figuring out why, and it's starting to become clear. But
they're just doing the best they can, usually.
I'm a psychotherapist, and a lot of people's parents didn't really try very hard.
Even try.
Oh, that's the stories I hear. So I actually appreciate that I got into mountaineering when I was 13. You'd think it was young, and I guess it was young. But it really, I mean, mountaineering is kind of a crazy thing, but it's got a lot of sane aspects like traveling and meeting people and planning and sticking your neck out and being responsible. And they don't teach you that in school, really. So I learned those things sort of on the road, and I'm still appreciating it. And now I've become a counselor for the American Alpine Club's Climbers Grief Fund. An interesting idea, self-explanatory. Mm-hmm. And it lets me reflect on issues. And, grief is an interesting thing. It's kind of a front for a lot of underlying feelings. Although I'm, practiced as a mountaineer and now I'm a psychotherapist, putting the two together is very interesting. I mean, I always thought those people were a little nuts. And they were, super high performers, high risk people, and not always stable, unfortunately. Like most of them don't know when to stop, and most of the people I climbed with are dead. But not the best ones. That should be remembered. I think that when you're the best at anything, you tend to transcend a lot of the nonsense that most people understand. And it's certainly true about extreme athletics. You learn your limits or else you fall off the edge of the world. Then I went to physics because I thought that would be a place for answers. And there I met, my experience with the world is limited to the places I visited, but I'd have to say I met the most morally low quality people I've ever met. And maybe I could blame academics for that because it's such a small sort of monarchy. And you know how monarchs are, and they sort of breed with their cousins. And
where were you, for hell's sake?
This is, you get involved with
it. Was this Utah or what? Where, Florida?
No, it was Texas, so that's not far away.
Oh, that explains it.
But, there's plenty of blue bloods from the East Coast there. And they're also, it's not genetic, but it's almost genetic when you think alike with so many people. After a while, nobody criticizes you for your thoughts, and this is a bad direction. So in physics, the technical skills are rampant and deep, but the moral ones, obviously, they're not, because everybody works for the military and nobody cares. This is what Oppenheimer was about, right? So it's real. It's a problem having moral responsibility when you have a lot of power.
You mean with power comes great responsibility? No way.
Yeah, we should have a moment's silence on that. Yeah, anyway, yeah, I have so many stories. I can't start talking about them because they'll wanted the 30,000-foot view. So off we go to the next segment of my life, which was I got involved with culture. It was partly mountaineering. You travel around the world, you meet people, and you wonder, why don't you know them? You're off climbing the mountain, and maybe those people in the little village in Peru had something to tell you, and they did. So I met people in New Zealand and Mongolia and Peru and Central America, and then I started to say, this is as interesting as mountaineering. I was very lucky, I must say, to have a girlfriend who was an anthropology student, and she did all the hard legwork to get me into a very remote tribe of people in Panama who don't like outsiders and who don't welcome them. So I got to live with these people for a month, and I wasn't, the annoying anthropologist taking notes. I was just helping around, helping with the chickens and cutting down the plantain trees and learning how to build dugout canoes. And it was kind of a wonderful experience. I'm still trying to figure that all out. There's so much in a culture that is not obvious. Anyway, so now I've got physics and I've got whatever you want to call it, authentic anthropology or authentic culture. Mm-hmm. And I started being interested in still mind, medicine, ceremony, religion. And then I found myself taking these crazy ayahuasca ceremonies, these psychedelic plant medicines from mostly the Americas. I don't think there's any ayahuasca outside the Americas. Anyway, so that went on for another 15 years. And
years of ayahuasca.
Yeah,
that's a long trip there.
Yeah. And I I mean, it's typical of me, is I didn't want to just take it. I wanted to learn it. I wanted to know it. I wanted to grow it. I wanted to make it. So I have all these interesting stories about poisoning myself with the wrong plants or plants harvested in the wrong season. There's no textbook for this stuff. I remember taking one plant, mixing it in with another plant, and getting extremely sick. And this voice came out of the ether and said, "What the hell are you doing here?" And, voices are interesting. They tell you things, and they're not always off base. So this was an on base voice, which, anyway.
I have one of those off base voices that always says kill, kill, kill all the time. The judge says I can't.
Don't make a joke of that. I have people who tell me that. They do have those voices. Yeah, well, they are paradox, those people. Like, why do you listen to that voice? I don't know.
That's not what Bob told me, Doc.
What? Say that again?
That's not what voice number 5 Bob told me, Doc.
I know. It's weird. That's another story. We'll get there. Anyway, so the people who do these ceremonies are relatively sane. Mostly adventure seekers, recreationalists, ceremonialists, some authentic indigenous people. And from that, I connected with people who were doing brain science. They were monitoring the brains of people taking these drugs. And that was interesting. And I knew, the electrical engineering behind that and the physics of waves and amplifiers. Mm-hmm. So I got involved in that for another decade or more of learning what's called brainwave training, neurofeedback. And I still hadn't really done psychology because it didn't meet my standards as a science. You've got culture, you've got ceremony, psychedelics, brain science, and it's still not a well-developed field, this brain training neuropsychology field. It's starting to become known slowly with books like The Body Keeps the Score.
We talk about that book a lot in this show.
But it's still not part of the training for people doing psychotherapy, so nobody learns it.
Isn't that amazing? Is it because it's deemed holistic, maybe?
The way that medicine is divided up into specialties separates the head from the heart and the psyche and the mind, and it's considered neurological or biochemical, and there are a couple of textbooks, but they're not integrated into the curriculum of psychotherapists. I'm a terrible student, and I tell my son, who's 14, throw that homework away, throw that garbage away. You write them the answer to the right questions, because the people who determine the questions are the ones who determine how you think.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're going to answer the wrong questions, then you're off, barking up the wrong tree.
They're misleading questions or leading questions.
Well, my son gets questions of why should Napoleon be in history? And I'm saying, I really have to censor myself because I'm a very profane person. You can just imagine me putting in mental beeps here. My disrespect for traditional education is very high. And I tell my son, don't answer questions about why Napoleon is important to history. Answer questions about why Donald Trump, Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, these are the people who are relevant. Anyway, so he doesn't listen to me, and he does his homework.
No. Kids. Maybe the better question is, and you're right, questions are important in how they're framed and how they're asked and getting good data. Maybe the question isn't so how, the assumptive presumption of the question of, how was Christopher Columbus, good for America, whatever.
Right.
Maybe the question should be, was he good for anything? Was there anything good or bad that came out of it? I don't know.
Or, I take it to another. Why do you think he's good?
Yeah.
Because that's an interesting question. Celebrate the famous people who are sufficiently long dead so they can't complain. I mean, this is, the whole thing about Christianity and Jesus Christ. Would Jesus Christ approve of how he's portrayed these days? A lot of people say no, but that doesn't stop him. Anyway, So to finish my 30,000 feet, then I got involved in psychotherapy, and I'm still involved in all these things. Hypnotherapy, don't forget. Dream work, very important. You had asked me when I was signing up for the show to sort of have my bullet points. And my bullet points are all about awareness. Mm-hmm. And the awareness that I focus on and try to convince everyone to understand and so I'm a therapist, I get clients, they come to me with questions and problems, is that there are different levels of awareness. And the three big ones are your subconscious, which you're vaguely aware of, and your conscious mind, which is like ruminating and talking to you. It's the voices, or yours or someone else's, or the schizophrenic ones, and your neurology, third one. Your consciousness, your subconsciousness, and your neurology. And people think only their conscious mind is in their control. I don't know if it even is. The questions of free will are a little sticky, but it's your subconscious that basically controls your direction. Your consciousness is just the autopilot that responds to your feelings, but your subconscious makes the feelings, builds them, and puts them in front of you. And you can't deny your feelings. I mean, you can verbally, but not emotionally.
Yeah, I mean,
you're about to say something.
It's a little hard to deny them. Right?
You can repress them, but how does that work out?
That's what alcohol's for.
No joke, man. No joke. Absolutely.
A lot of people do use tune-out devices like drugs, alcohol.
I was just reading, pot used to be 5% THC and people could handle it. And now it's 99% THC, and a lot of people cannot handle it. Wow. And it's doing some serious metabolic damage to people. Not everyone, but some people just
I've seen some edibles that you can order that have about 1,500 milligrams of THC in them per piece. There's 10 pieces in a thing. And if I take 10 milligrams, like I'm going to sleep. Then I'm just going to curl up in a ball. At 20, I'm going to sleep. And there's people running out there taking 50, 100, 1,500 milligrams.
I have a client who's a schizophrenic, and this client takes THC gummies, and a few weeks ago she had a psychotic break.
Really?
And it's one of the symptoms of THC poisoning. And happily, she's not going to take them anymore, but it gets worse. Anyway, what are we talking about? Oh, why people do this. Yes. Yeah, so I try to get people to get in touch with themselves other ways, a little more hands on the wheel. And it's not that easy, Sometimes people don't want, that's sort of one of the reasons that comes up when you talk about why alcohol, why drugs. They don't really want an alternative. This is the alternative they like. This is their coping strategy. And the alternative, when they come to me, is I read them the riot act. I say, if you don't get your shit together, it's not going to get together. And how do you get it together? You start understanding your neurology, what you've built yourself to respond to. How do you do that? How do you see it? You start interacting with your subconscious and taking some role in the feelings that you have, not just responding to them. Mm-hmm. But so now I'm talking about taking psychedelics, doing hypnotherapy, doing dream work. Dream work's great, but it's really kind of hard. It interrupts your sleep, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's great stuff and rich. Mm-hmm. And I always ask my clients, what are your dreams? What's come up? And it's usually a source of novelty. Anyway, here we are. But I think that, to look forward, I think we're all obliged to change the world. I think that's what we were born here to do. I mean, really. If you're not contributing, you're kind of ancillary to the whole program.
Yeah.
So how do
usually
you do it by this program, and you wrote books too. Yeah. And I should say, the what is it? Don't Compromise book.
Don't Compromise book. Here, let me try and pull that up.
Oh, never.
Don't Compromise. Are you talking about The Negotiator, the other Chris Voss?
Yes. I was looking at his book. That's not you?
No. My book is Beacons of Leadership, and yeah, I have the podcast for 60 years, and he doesn't.
The other Chris Voss wrote a book called Never Split the Difference, about how compromise was kind of a bad thing because it meant that you didn't come to common agreement. You agreed to disagree.
Yeah.
And I do this with all my people, all my clients. I say, you're not really looking for compromise in your life or with your problems. You're looking for resolution.
Oh.
And, that puts things in a different light.
What about people who are looking for confirmation bias?
Looking for confirmation bias?
Yeah. They're seeking confirmation bias or seeking
You mean
confirmation of their bias.
yes? Okay.
Yeah.
I
I'm not
would
a
say,
therapist, clearly. So
take responsibility for what your bias is.
yeah. And
And
there are some people that they just go around the world not really seeking education. They just want their biases confirmed and
but that's your filter. This gets to the sort of metacognitive level. Think about your thinking. Look at what your filter is doing. Look at your environment. This is one of the biggest problems with people's lives is that they surround themselves with people who reinforce their feelings. Good and bad. Mostly bad if they come to me, because if they're good, they don't come to me.
the court doesn't order it then, huh?
I don't know if you could do forensic psychology. It seems like an oxymoron to force somebody to change. And I don't do that.
Yeah. I mean,
I wonder if I
like you
could.
said, I think at the beginning of the show, people have to choose to make that journey.
Pretty much. And that's what I do with. So I've got two kinds of clients now. So we went through the culture and the physics and the psychedelics and the hypnotherapy and the brain training, and we got down to therapy. And I get two kinds of clients. The ones who are, or say they're disabled and have a problem and want a solution, and the ones who are enabled and they're on the top of their game and they're trying to figure out either what to do or how to get rid of what's bothering them. And you can imagine that's kind of two different worlds. The guy on the top of his game is a hyperachiever, and the guy on the bottom of his game is considered a low achiever. And in both cases, though, I'm telling people to get in touch with what they're seeing and really what you're saying, what their bias is in how they perceive the world, and take responsibility for it. Not to be guilty. This is different. Feeling a lot of people have guilt and they're ashamed and they're trying to make up for it. That's the reason that they surround themselves with supportive people. Like I had one client who says, I haven't been drinking anymore for 6 months, but I've really met this great girl and I'm interested in developing a relationship. I met her at AA. And I said, oh, wait a minute. This is like the wrong place to meet girls if you're trying to.
You don't need to. I've dated an alcoholic. You don't need to have two alcoholics in that.
Especially if you are one already.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point is that, you build your environment and, the typical thing is you have extramarital relationships with your neighbor or, somebody in your environment. So if your environment is a reflection of your bias, then even though you don't know it, you're going to get reinforced.
Yeah.
So how do you get outside of that? It's not hard. You got to do uncomfortable things like go to strange places and meet strange people and go onto podcasts with people you don't know and make mistakes that Chris Voss number 1 is Chris Voss number 2. And this is great. It really is. So now tell me about yourself. Why are you doing this?
Are you asking me seriously on the show? This is
30,000 foot view. Yeah.
30,000 foot view. So fun fact, the Christopher Voss, who's the FBI agent, I built the Chris Voss brand. I have Chris Voss everything. Chris Voss LinkedIn, Chris Voss Twitter, although it's suspended now, Chris Voss Instagram. It got hacked by a Chinese organization after 10 years. But I own everything Chris Voss. I started the Chris Voss brand on social media 16 years ago. And somewhere in 2016, a guy with no followers decided to hijack someone with millions of followers across social media and recognition. And instead of putting Christopher Voss, his name he uses on his book, he used my name in the format to hijack our awards and our interests and everything else. He's done a really great job hijacking it and building a great brand, but we still own the Chris Voss brand, so we're keeping our fists around it. To why I do this podcast? Was that the question? I lost track on the segue there.
Yeah, I think the question is, how did you get yourself into a position to do it? Were you a marketing person, a journalist?
I started my first company at 18 and been an entrepreneur ever since, worked for myself ever since. Sometimes other people and a consultant or a referendum more sort of thing. But for the most part, all my own companies, doing my own thing. I've always been the big mouth, the CEO, hundreds of employees, thousands of employees over the years. And so I'm used to being the cheerleader, the talker, the guy who shares vision, the guy who communicates leadership, all that sort of stuff. And for me, once 2008 hit, kind of wiped out a lot of our companies, it was like, okay, what are you going to do, Chris? I'm going to be a consultant on business and go do that. And in doing so, I always wanted to be a DJ. I always loved radio. I always loved how funny radio DJs were because I grew up in that area of the radio. And podcasting was kind of coming of age, people talking about their thing. And so we jumped on and said, hey, cool, I have stuff to talk about. It was basically the model that everyone uses now 16 years ago, where it's like, hey, you give people free information, they'll hire you to do stuff for you. So that's why I got into it. And I really have, Larry King said one time, he goes, I really am interested in people. I find them very curious. He goes, wherever I'm at, I talk to them, I ask them questions. And for me, life is a collection of stories. I'm a griot from ancient Africa. I love collecting stories. I love hearing people's stories. I'm sick of my own, although my audience is like, he tells his stories on the show all the time. But I like hearing other people's stories, their journeys. Like, why did you choose this over that? Why did you go down this pathway? And so it's very interesting to me. And I learn from every guest that we have on the show. I'll learn something new every time. And that's kind of what I love, learning aspect of it. And plus, it seems to change the world. It seems to impact a lot of people. A lot of people have told me that they change their lives, change the world. We've got millions of downloads. We've reached millions of people. Having that sort of effective change that we gave away for free. I mean, awesome. Can't beat it.
Let me jump in here. I've heard enough from you, Chris. No. Actually, you haven't told me the real dirt, but okay.
The real dirt?
The real dirt. Yeah.
Cruise and blow.
That's right. When you were out in parole and, the car you crashed and the person that's injured.
I've got 7 of those parole, what do they call them? The ankle bracelets. I get one off tomorrow. It's a joke.
There is no such thing as a joke. That's what you learn in psychology. There's all jokes, if it's a good joke, has a resonance. Otherwise, it's just false dead. But anyway.
Some of us that are comedians, we just write jokes for the sake of writing jokes, and they don't really have a resonance.
And then like Robin Williams, you go and you hang yourself in the closet. So watch out about that one.
I'm not Robin Williams.
And
I don't listen to NXS.
All right, so I forgot one part of my life, which was that after physics, I became a computer scientist and spent 20 years writing financial software. And that was interesting because I worked for all these middle-sized businesses, and I worked for these CEOs, and they're all not all, some are a little warped. The ones that worked the best with me were technical because they understood what I was talking about. And the ones that worked the least were, I don't know, crazy in other ways that I didn't understand.
You say crazy like it's a bad thing.
No, I don't, but it's a potential. It really is a potential.
Bad thing.
You can use it or you can abuse it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so part of my shtick now is to try to get people to perform at their best. Well, that sounds really canned, but
it's okay. I mean, that's what we're all trying to do. I think we're trying to do the podcast too.
Yeah, that's true. You are. Yeah. And so look, as a therapist, people who come to you have to have an issue because I'm charging $200 an hour. If you don't have an issue, it's funny. Sometimes people get other people to pay for them. And then those therapies don't go very well because they don't have skin in the game. I do have a little of that imposter syndrome where I'm wondering if I'm really worth it. But my clients tell me you are. And the other interesting thing is you're always better as a therapist if you don't know what you're doing because then you have no preconceptions, no bias. And we're talking like you and your knowledge of stories. These stories are wild. And for you to preconceive what somebody else's story is about is probably unjustified. So you really have to not know. And, okay, I have skills. I have talking skills. Like you have talking skills. I have listening skills.
What?
But do I have solution skills? No. You're the person who has the solutions. I'm supposed to fish them out of you. Make you realize them and realize how you're standing in your own way and what your biases are and what your traumas are from your parents. And it's like for me, I think I told you I'm still figuring this out. I feel like I was abandoned as a child because I didn't have any brothers or sisters my age, and my father was a workaholic, and my mother was, I guess she was crazy. I couldn't figure it out. What?
How long have you been feeling this way?
My whole life.
Your whole life?
I remember I wanted to kill my mother. I was like 6. I was fantasizing about killing her because the reason was I couldn't get any response from her. Because she just was 30% there. And I thought, I don't know what I thought, but I was unhappy. Yeah. So this is like plagued me for the rest of my life. I get involved with people who I want real relationship.
Yeah.
And it hasn't worked that well because most people aren't ready for a real relationship unless they're willing to pay you $200 an hour. Mm-hmm. Most of my real relationships are with my clients, and I couldn't put up with socializing and, chit chat and talking about the weather.
No, you can see a therapist about that.
I talk to myself quite a lot, actually. And I talk to a lot of dead people, too.
Oh, all right.
Whenever I'm in a physics problem I can't solve, I bring up Feynman or Dirac, and I have them explain it. Of course, I got to read the textbook, too, but, it's a useful thing to put another voice in.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad voice. They don't tell me I'm stupid.
Yeah. That's why I have multiple personalities, so I can have the different voices. It just adds.
You're joking again, but I'm telling you, I've got clients who are like that.
Yeah, well,
and they don't sound a lot different than you.
That's why the joke rides so well.
That's right. That's right.
Shut up, Bob.
But actually,
kill.
To take it a little more seriously, people with multiple personality disorder. The reason it's a disorder is because they don't know they have it.
Ah.
If you know you have it, or if you know you've got other personalities, then they're talking to each other. It's not so much a problem.
Yeah, they're having.
It's when they don't. It's when it's stop me before I kill again.
Yeah.
Then it's the problem.
One of my Karen's no longer talking to Bob right now in my personality circle, but yeah, they'll get together. They'll make up later, I'm sure. But that does make sense if you don't know you're the problem. What is the thing I saw?
It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah. It's like the Russians. How do you know you're the useful idiot of the Russians?
I don't know that. What's
in the
that?
room? How do you know who's the let's see. If you don't know who the useful idiot is for the Russians in the room, it's probably you.
Yeah.
So on your book, Operating Manual for Enlightenment, you help people find their way to enlightenment. There are several different topics you talk about here: struggle, the mind, state, which is the state of the mind, I guess, wisdom,
yes.
Instantaneous enlightenment. You want to flesh any of these out, Brian?
It goes back to what I said before. There's the three parts: the subconscious, the conscious, and your neurology. I mean, you could break it down into the body. I don't want to discard the body. The body has its intelligence. That's Vanderkook's book, The Body Keeps the Score. And I'm trying in this book to get people to see all these different levels of awareness that they could have and could relate to if they paid attention. Mm-hmm. So, how much do you know about your liver? Probably 0. Could you know more? I don't know. How much do you know about your colon? Actually, we know a lot about our colon because it tells us when to go to the bathroom, quite dramatically, without any argument. And so you do interact with your body, your lungs, your stomach, your heart, your skin, and your body tells you things, and you think that it's just physical and objective, but it's not. It changes your hormones. It changes your thinking. There are all kinds of weird ideas about how your digestion affects your mind. You have a nervous system in your gut that's 1/10 the size of your brain, and it actually doesn't take orders from your brain. It sends the orders to your brain.
Your second brain.
Yeah. In this book, I'm trying to get people to see if you have physical issues, what are they? Why are they? What are they saying to you? What are they actually trying to tell you rather than just, comfort and pain? Mm-hmm. And the neurology is interesting. A quick tour of neurology is that different parts of your brain have dominant roles in different parts of your thought. It doesn't break down so mechanically to, that there's a part of your brain that does music and a part of your brain that does just language. For example, your eyes are interesting. Your left eye is attached to your right brain and your right eye is attached to your left brain, but only the central vision. The peripheral vision, it's opposite. So the central vision of your right eye is attached to your left brain, but the peripheral vision of your right eye is attached to your right brain. And your right brain does associative processing and pattern recognition, and your left brain does analytical, executive function, language, hearing, things.
I'm going cross.
Deductive, yes. But no, that's the point. Crossing. Your eyes are doing the crossing, and your brain is doing the integrating. And you can work at building up all parts of this chain. So how do you do it? Lots of different ways. Education is probably the weakest way, but it's the process of doing it that gets you strong. And what I do is called brain training, where you actually look at the electrical vibrations coming out of your cranium, which are sort of related to the substrate underneath your cranium, but it gets diffuse because it's tissue after all. And you can train certain brain's areas to be more or less active. So, for example, this is a dramatic example. In the 40s, there was this wonderful surgery called prefrontal lobotomy.
I love those.
Which, yeah, the guy got a Nobel Prize for it. And he went around the country in his station wagon giving it to people, I don't know how many thousands, tens of thousands of people whose lives were destroyed by having essentially an ice pick stuck behind their right eye and scrambled their right frontal cortex.
That's our freak fest.
It's that part of your brain that handles fear and anxiety and anger. So if it's dysfunctional, then you're a semi-vegetable, and a very nice one for the caretakers that have to wheel you around. But you don't have to destroy that area. You can actually train it. You can train it to be electrically calmer. Okay? So you put a little electrode over your right eye, and you look at the electrical strength that's emanated from that area of your brain, and you tell the client who's sitting in the chair hooked up to your amplifier, make it quiet. And they say, how? And they say, I don't know, just do it. And you give them some feedback. You give them a little bar that goes up and down when it's noisy and goes down when it's quiet, or all kinds of feedback things. But basically, you're seeing what you're doing. So imagine, how could you learn to ride a bicycle if you were blind and had no sense of balance? You couldn't. You just fall over. Yeah. You need feedback. And in the case of a bicycle, you can learn to do it through some miracle, which is not all that different from learning how to walk. And with some feedback, your brain learns how to control itself too. And the kicker is there has to be some benefit to it. Otherwise, your brain's not going to do it. If it was painful, you probably wouldn't do it. But you like riding a bicycle. It doesn't hurt. It gets you there faster, and it's fun. So you learn. Same with walking. Same with brain training. So certain people's problems focus on certain brain areas, and sometimes they're dysfunction. So the dramatic brain dysfunctions are like epilepsy or traumatic brain injury, where you've got a concussion or an aneurysm, and it leaves a real disruption. And you can train yourself back to normal. You can regain function. People with strokes, not all, I don't know, it depends on the nature of the stroke. You can regain language, you can regain cognition, and you and I can regain our memories. Maybe. Still working on that.
Why did I walk in this room?
You make these jokes, and they hit right at the heart of the matter.
That's the beauty of jokes.
Yes. Anyway, so I try to, that's one of the 3 aspects of this book. So Operating Manual for Enlightenment, where is just about enlightenment, in my view, is becoming aware. It's true. What you do with it is important. You could hide your head in the sand because you can't put up with it. And, I kind of did that. I moved to Canada because I said, this American politics, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
So you actually moved to Canada over
I moved
politics?
to Canada. And now I put up with the Canadian politics are just, it's almost like another country up here, but it's not really. Okay. No.
Politics doesn't change over eons of time. Really.
Now, if I went to China, it would be different, but who wants to go to China?
Yeah.
Everyone's leaving China. Your neurology, understanding your neurology, understanding that you can change your neurology, understanding that your nature changes with your nurture. So how you grow up actually becomes firmware in your brain. And firmware is open to change, but not easy change. So I'm actually trying to do this with more and more of my clients, because although that's never their first problem, the amplitude of my right prefrontal cortex is too high in the alpha range. That no one comes to me with that problem. But I would like to tell them that that's half of their solution. It's the bottom half of the solution in many cases.
I like what you said there. It could be on a coffee cup. What was it again? It had a short little blip there.
What, my right prefrontal cortex alpha amplitudes are too high? Is that the one?
No, before that.
You want me to remember?
It was really short. Anyway, it's on the show. So
okay.
Go find it later. But it was about the blueprints, the original things that people have. Anyway, I guess it's lost.
Your nature is nurtured. You develop firmware.
That's it. Your nature is the nurturing is your naturing, or however you said it.
So this is really important.
Coffee cup.
It's really put it on a coffee cup, but have it tattooed on your forehead or something. Yeah. So this is why I'm talking to you on a podcast. I deal with people for their individual issues, and of course it's personal, and I don't talk about it, at least directly. And there's a similarity to everyone's trying to up their game, whether they're a high-functioning or a low-functioning person.
Are some people really trying? Because I've got some dating groups, and a few of them are trying.
Yeah, the ones that come to me. I'm just not everyone. Everyone comes to me.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, you're right.
I think there's a term they have for this, controlled group or something. Controlled dating. I
would like to get more people. So why don't more people work at it? This is a question we can both ask.
You have to face yourself. You have to be accountable. I mean, we live in a world now where it's a victimhood emotional society instead of logic and reason and meritocracy. And people want to operate from one of two things. They either want to claim that I saw a joke once called Schroeder's feminist. People want to operate from two things. They either want to be the victim or they want to empower. So when they decide whether or not they're going to have how they're going to deal with the situation, tell it to the world, they decide, am I going to be a victim with what happened to me, or am I going to claim that I'm empowered by what happened to me? And those are two choices they make. But we live in this victimhood competition where it's, oh, you fell and cut yourself? Wait, I fell and cut myself bigger. Let me show you my scars bigger. And lack of self-accountability is just huge. Like, it's almost, especially with one sex, it's almost like it's almost like Superman and the green stuff. What was it? He used to have to avoid kryptonite. And the narcissism rise in our society of narcissism through social media, all the other ills, has just made people, they just won't embrace self-accountability. And I think that's why it's hard, because they would have to face themselves. They would have to look at themselves in the mirror and go, I'm the fuck up here.
Thank you for using the F word. Now I know it's allowed. So I just finished writing, not one of my best pieces, but I like it anyway. I like everything I do. That's the key of a person who keeps going forward. A piece on conspiracy theory. And that is one of people's excuses, I believe. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm a great conspiracy theorist. I don't think it really makes sense. I think conspiracy theories are just how the world works. But to feel victimized by conspiracy is something that people like, because it takes responsibility away from them. Now they can point to the Illuminati or the Pizzagate or, what they can't see and can't do anything about. That's the big issue. And I rail against that. I say, if you can't figure out who the problem or the perpetrator is, then you're fooling yourself. Work on things that you can understand. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can worry a little bit about crazy things.
Sure.
It's always useful. That could be inspiring. But, don't be a vigilante trying to, I don't want to go into, I'm not even a good conspiracy theorist. I don't keep up on it. But chemtrails are one that drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Chemtrails,
those are the ones that are making the frogs gay, I think, or something like that. Whatever. That's an Jones reference.
So the people who come to me have decided to take action. I used to think psychotherapy was for sick people, but now I realize it's usually for people who want to get out of their hole. And some of them make $1 million a year. So it may be a hole that a lot of people want to get into.
I mean, I've done that. I grew up poor and got successful and rich. And then I was miserable because I thought that would fix all of my personal problems and trauma from childhood and damage. And
yes,
it didn't. It amplified them.
And I want to sort of contradict your distinction between the people who blame others, victimizers, because I have a lot of high performers who can't stop complaining about their crappy clients, their lousy boss, and their uneducated underlings.
Yeah, that's Thursdays around here at the show.
I don't even want to talk about what goes on after air on this show of yours.
It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that hour of the PDD Freak Fest where he says, "All right, all you either need to go or stay, but it's going to get weird.
I don't get that reference, but that's okay.
You got to be on the P. Diddy train.
That's right.
I don't know if you've been following the news on the P. Diddy thing. He was just arrested and put in jail. I should probably note for people who watch this 10 years from now.
I do follow the news, but I only read the headlines. That's my rule.
Yeah, you got to get down into the baby oil, and then you'll start finding stuff out.
Okay, now let's get serious, Chris.
Yeah.
So the people who are not ready to put their nickel in the coaching, counseling, management slot, they go to the Chris Voss show, and they sort of tiptoe around the edge of commitment to make change. They want to say, what are the opportunities? What can I learn? Where can I go? And I want to talk to those people and say, you can't fart around for too long. You have to jump out the door. It's interesting. In Mongolia, it's the only culture I've ever been in that's a really intact old culture. In Mongolia, there are a lot of attitudes people have, biases that everyone shares and nobody's even aware of. One of them is you do not stand in a doorway. It's socially inappropriate for somebody to linger in a doorway. And you could say it means that they're non-committal. It means that they're obstructing the passage or flow of things. And if you stand in a doorway in Mongolia, you will be pushed out of it by people who don't even know they're pushing you out of it. It's uncomfortable to them for you to be in the doorway. So they, shoulder you out of it.
They shoulder you out of it, give you a bung.
And so that's what I'd like to, I think that's a good attitude. Don't hang around too much listening to Chris Voss. Go do it. You can go back and sit, give him 5 stars and thank him for what he did for you. But you gotta move forward.
We talk about this a lot on the show, and hopefully we're the entry drug to professional psychotherapy. And we often talk
or coaching. You could call it something else.
Yeah. I like professional coaching. I usually tell people to go with someone who has a degree and a license. I'm big on that. When people come to me and go, I hired a crystal coach, I'm just like, all right, what the fuck?
Yes.
And we're very critical of that. And we really believe that go see a professional. Because I hear it on dates. I hear it in my dating group. I hear it from people all over the place. I self-healed myself. Really? You were molested as a child and you self-healed yourself.
Yes.
And you're a woman, which is going to carry a lifetime of damage and emotional issues. You fixed yourself? Yeah. How'd you do it? Oh, through crystals or astrology or, I don't know, religion. Some people do that. And so we're a big proponent. We always tell people, go seek professional help. Don't fuck around. People always ask me, what would you say to your 16-year-old self, your teenage self? People kick those little tropes around on Facebook. And I'm like, I tell myself to get into therapy. And people are like, really? That's what you tell yourself? I'm like, yeah, I was a pretty fucked up kid.
Yeah, I have to agree with you.
It's changed. Well, yeah, then or now?
But here's a sad story, and it's a short one. I got a call by a young kid who said that he succeeded in having sex with his father.
What the fuck?
And he asked me, do you think I'm a homosexual? And he didn't hire me, right? So I'm not his therapist. I'm not really allowed to start talking. Yeah. But I said to him, I'm thinking, that should be the least of your concerns here. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm saying, you need some guidance. You need some boundaries. You need to understand. And you know what the sad part of the story is? He never called me back. And so this is part of the story too. Some people need to fall in the ditch before they realize they're off the road.
Some people have to hit Skid Row. And
I don't understand that. That has to be so bad. But
I sometimes I don't understand it, but sometimes I've had my own cathartic moments, and you can kind of say they were my bottoms. And so sometimes we have to go through that cathartic crisis. There's been time. I started losing weight one day when I was almost 400 pounds, and I just got sick of feeling sick and shitty and awful and miserable and being bloated and fat. And one day I just broke, and I don't know. There wasn't a real proponent to it.
Yes,
I just said I fucking don't want to feel like this anymore. I quit. Wow. I quit drinking. I didn't have a problem drinking, but as I got older, it just wasn't any fun anymore. It's 2 hours of fun on Friday means 3 hours of bloating, drag, carrying water weight. I just feel that my energy would be shit for 3 days.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, the math doesn't work here anymore, man. And I'm tired. You get old enough, it's 3 beers, you have a hangover, when you used to be able to drink like a whole bottle of vodka before that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so one day I just said, I'm just not doing this anymore. It's just not, it's just, I'd rather feel good. And I just stopped. And so some people just, I guess they have to hit that. For some people it's a bottom. For some people it's a cathartic moment. For some people it's it's that network TV movie event where you go to the window and shout, I'm sick of hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
This is part of what my book is about. It only takes an instant for you to become enlightened.
Oh yeah.
But it can take a lifetime to get to the point where it's going to happen.
Yeah. I had to learn how to eat better. I had to learn how to prepare my food better.
The point is, like, what were you doing to get to that point? You didn't even know that you were heading toward that point.
Yeah.
But here's a good question for you. Mm-hmm. Could you have avoided that?
By doing the right thing, like eating
I don't know what. I don't know. What? What could you have done that would have brought you to the point of enlightenment sooner? Anything?
Not really, no. There was a
proponent. Oh man, come on! I can't accept that.
So hold on, there was a proponent to it. I'm a big fan of Penn Jillette and their magic over there, and he put out a book called Presto, and he was doing a tour saying how he lost 100 pounds in a very short period of time and was enjoying his health. And some of the things he talked about, like the belief systems that people have in their head about all sorts of things that they bullshit themselves to hang themselves up with. I had belief systems about food. Oh, it's a reward. Oh, it's things from childhood. And he had some ways that he talked about when he was doing the book tour that I saw, and I went, fuck, I'm going to get his book. And then I started reading his book and seeing how my belief systems were complete shit that I believed, and I was just using it to cope and substantiate myself. You need 10 to 15 Mountain Dews a day to keep the energy going for work. And so by recreating new belief systems, I was able to reconfigure how, and I started waking up. I would be like, Jesus Christ, I believe that, the food pyramid was from the 70s was a good idea. I believed that, so I started really examining my beliefs. And so kind of that book Presto was kind of the point where when I read it, I went, fuck this, I'm going to do what he did. So that kind of was the helper thing. I don't think I could have made the conversion without that book. Yeah. I've been spoken to him and thanked him several times because I'm like, you saved my life, dude. You fucking saved my life. And so I needed to have the tool and really his book and his change in his belief systems that he learned that helped him lose 100 pounds. I just copied that. And so it was kind of a cathartic moment of I'm sick of feeling like shit, but it was also a cathartic moment of someone handed me a tool. And I went,
well, I'm going to read that book. Here's a story of a client I had who came to me with anxiety and insomnia and, was plagued by it. Mm-hmm. And we did brain training because I thought it would be good for him. Mm-hmm. And it was making him feel better. And within a month, he, started to drop his anxiousness. And then he got a hold of this book that he said changed his life. The book said, it was one of these really poorly produced books, didn't even have a ISBN number in it or a publisher, and full of misspellings. And it said basically this: don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
That's it. That's all it said. And he said, "It's opened my eyes." And I said to him, "Look, Bob, it opened your eyes because your eyes were almost open.
Uh-huh.
And before that, you were never going to get out of the hole. Your brain was so repetitively anxious that message would never have made it. But now that you were ready to accept that because you had no reason to hold on to your anxiety." Okay, so sometimes the book is instrumental, and sometimes the book is just icing on the cake.
Yeah.
And so I would say, to you too, Chris, Penn Jillette's book probably came at the right time for you.
It did. It was very momentous. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't have been able to make the change and the tools that he had in it, the belief systems, and he showed how he took his belief systems about food and eating, which were a lot like mine and a lot like a lot of people's that are raised by parents. I was taught to eat everything on my plate, right? Not a good idea. Nowadays, when I eat, I go out, I'll usually eat half of whatever I have. My dates hate me when I do this. And then I take the other half home. And it's a habit now to where I just don't even think about it. I'm kind of full when I eat half my meal. And it keeps from overloading my system. I used to have this, my mom used to do this thing, and she meant no malice by it, but I think a lot of moms did. She would tell us, hey, if you're good in the store, cause a scene, cause problems and be noisy and, mind, be good, you'll get a reward when we leave. I'll get you a Coke or a Snickers bar or something. And we wanted one of those. So we would always be good. And so all my life, up until the time I was, 45 when I made this change, I would always load up my cart with the most fattiest cholesterol article clogging shit you could. I was drinking 10 to 15 Mountain Dews a day, several 6-packs of Mountain Dew. And then on top of that, I would be like, I need a reward for going to the store as a 45-year-old adult. And I would get, I don't know, a giant bottle of fucking Coke and, and some
ice cream,
double Snickers, Nowadays the Snickers bars they have are the size of 2 insulin.
Oh, THC and pot.
Yeah. And so I had to deconstruct. I'm like, dude, that's not a reward. You're fucking ruining your health with this stupid shit. You're a grown adult. You don't need a reward. You went shopping. What do you want, a fucking medal? And, I put all these bullshitting, self-deluding, coping things that I had around food. And so that book really helped change. So there was a bit of a proponent. Someone told me when I was finishing my book and I was really losing my mind over the editing part, the re-editing part. And I was at that all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy stage where I felt like I was typing that all over.
Yes. Yeah.
And I complained to one of my author friends, and she goes, there's somebody out there that needs your book, and there's the only one person who can get through to them is you. And they've got to hear your stories that you're telling this book. And while they seem to be at you at this point, you're sick of them, and you don't want to deal with them anymore, and you just want to fucking quit. That person out there needs your book. And you may not ever meet them, you may not ever know who they are, but they need to hear it from you, and they need to hear your story to make the difference in their life. And I went, wow, that's fucking powerful. And fortunately, I've met people that read my book, and it's changed and had an impact in their life. And of course, the podcast does a lot of that same thing. And yeah, that's the great thing about books. You don't know how it's going to trigger some people. Maybe the Chris Voss show is the entry drug to psychology. I would hope that we would be. We don't bore people. I've often joked at our singles events that we throw and the podcast that maybe we should have a psychiatrist sit in and pass out cards to everyone.
Not a psychiatrist, a psychologist. Or a therapist. They're all. Yeah. It's like it's like the Catholic religion. There are bishops and cardinals and popes. You got to deal with the pastors.
One does drugs and one asks you if your mother hugged you enough. Is that how it works?
Wait, say that again. One
of them does drugs, prescribes drugs, and the other one asks you what happened with your mother.
That's right. Next. Yeah. So you don't tell people to go to psychiatrists. They're
okay.
They're the evil therapy. Technicians. Yes.
Therapy.
Therapy or whatever you want to call it.
Can't afford that, get good drugs. Anyway, no, don't do that, people. We're just kidding. So as we go out, pitch people on where to pick up the book, reach out to you for your services and all that sort of good stuff, .coms, etc.
Very good. So I have a blog. I write. If you pay for it, you get it weekly. And if you want it free, you get it monthly. And if you sign up for the monthly free blog, you'll get a downloadable e-version of this book for nothing.
Nice.
Yes, just get your act in gear. Sign up for the blog, and you can always cancel it, but I hope you won't. And read the book.
That part.
If you've started to listen to this podcast, then you're obviously looking for the tool that you need. And as Chris says, this might be it. Yeah. I tend to be kind of cerebral, and it's very dense. It's not technical or academic, but it's straightforward. Let's talk about your subconscious. Let's talk about how your brain works. And let's talk about your childhood and how your thinking works. Yeah. So that's the book. MindStrengthBalance.com. Mind, no spaces, mindstrengthbalance.com. Mind, strength, balance. Anyway, it'll pop up and ask you for your subscription, and then you're off and running. Then it sends you an email and you get the download link for the book.
Sign up there. And then people can order your original manuscript, May 13th, 2024, Operating Manual for Enlightenment, Recreating Your Mind, or they can watch for the 15th of this month, which is about 7 days, for the revised version.
This is true. And there's an audiobook if you want to listen to it.
Audiobooks are good. Kindle. Thank you very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, Lincoln.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss, one of the TikTok and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. And that should have us out. Fun is fun. Great discussion